Welcome to Decelerator. I'm your host, Rob Kennedy, and today I'm talking to Markus Raunig of Austrian Startups. But first, I want to talk to you about expertise. So this week I wanted to talk about expertise. What's been going on in the podcasting zeitgeist? There's a guy named Douglas Murray who is controversial but intelligent, and he went onto the Joe Rogan podcast and basically spent 2.5 hours pushing back on Joe Rogan platforming people who have large reach, but not necessarily any real expertise on the subject. And anytime those people were challenged, they would say, well, I'm just a comedian. So I'm not an expert, I'm just a comedian. So Douglas Murray went on the show and spent 2.5 hours lambasting them for platforming people like this. And then subsequent to that, Douglas Murray went on the Sam Harris Making Sense podcast, and they did a sort of play-by-play analysis or deconstruction of that. So if you want to spend 3 hours of your weekend just watching that tennis match and seeing the expert versus followers debate, it's kind of entertaining. But it made me think that, since everyone has a microphone, credentials almost feel optional, and expertise, especially in tech, where does it fit? So expertise at the end of the day is about subject mastery, having the depth, the rigor, and going through, we created universities and schools to accredit and test and put you through some form of rigor so that we can say, well, this person is an expert in a particular topic. So for example, if you go to your doctor, you may not like the diagnosis, maybe you get a second opinion, but if they've been accredited, you can be assured that they've gone at least through some sort of process to make sure they are knowledgeable and have had that knowledge tested. And the Sam Harris example that he uses on his podcast is, do you want somebody who's like, oh no, I've read a lot about being a pilot, so I'm actually going to be a good pilot for your plane? Or somebody who's been trained, read the manual, and gone through all the hours you need to do to be flight certified? I choose that one. So experts obviously matter in our society, but what we think about those experts have changed. In fact, we used to defer to those experts almost entirely, which I think obviously was not the right place to be. But now we just fact check with Google. And I think tech had a role to play in it. On the one hand, and I'm in tech. Naivete is actually a feature, not a bug, especially for disruptors. If you're going to go in and sort of break the paradigm in a given field, knowing what you know about all the blocks that are in the way is actually detrimental. Not knowing and just doing what you think is right and moving very quickly is actually a way to break those paradigms. So that's sort of been de rigueur for the last couple of decades. And then if you think about where experts are now, well, what's really interesting is that people you see on social media, it doesn't matter if it's LinkedIn or TikTok or Twitter or YouTube, it doesn't really matter. The expertise is not necessarily in the facts that they're stating. The expertise is in the ability to use the algorithms to push themselves to the top. So expertise is about algorithm manipulation. And I'm not necessarily saying that in an evil way. I'm just saying they know how to manipulate the algorithm. Whether they know anything about the actual subject matter they talk about, it's not always the case. And now I think we've got to the point where, because technology has gotten quite complicated with AI and climate models and even self-driving cars, single errors can be quite catastrophic. Do you want a car that doesn't know what a human is or gets it wrong and runs into people? Do you want artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence to make an error? Expertise matters, I think, now more than ever. So I think that where you need to have complexity and you need to understand how to communicate that complexity. And I hope it's going to start to beat hype. Basically, depth is scarce, attention is cheap. Scarcity, I hope, wins. Ultimately, where I'm going with this is, I think either the pendulum is swinging back or we should help swing it back. Remember, we went from automatic deference, whatever the doctor says, I just listen to. That's dangerous. To total dismissal of experts, which I think where we're at right now. And because of all the risks with all these technologies and the way that we're working right now, I think we have to pull the pendulum back to the center. I know that I personally have tried hard, and I've been guilty of reaching outside of my expertise range with my hot takes, but empathy has to be part of this equation too. So here's what I think the new social contract needs to look like. And I get that this is hard, but I think we should have a North Star. experts must master translation, not just information. You have to be able to communicate that science isn't an end, it is a means. Platforms must surface credibility, not just engagement. The algorithm has to think about the credibility of the human behind those things. And we have to reward those platforms for doing the right things. And then finally, I think as audiences, we have to reward humility and evidence over hot takes. In an era of infinite noise, evidence-backed expertise coupled with clarity, empathy, and humility is really the only durable moat. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I'm a certified TikTok dance instructor, so I have to go judge a competition. See you soon. My guest today is Markus Raunig. He is the chair at Austrian Startups, a podcast host like me at Future Weekly. He advises the Austria's federal government on startups, and he even works at the EU level trying to kind of foment the startup ecosystem in the EU. This show is about talking to entrepreneurs, investors, and ecosystems that are building tech companies differently. And so we're really fortunate to have had a chat with Markus. It was wide-ranging, and you'll see lots of patterns on non-American ecosystems and how they think about their place in the world. So I really enjoyed the chat with Markus. Let me know what you think. Markus Raunig. All right. Hey, Markus, thanks for joining us on the show. Why don't you tell us, well, what you do with your time?
Thanks for the invite. I'm super happy to join you today. I'm mainly chairing Austrian Startups, which is the umbrella organization of the Austrian startup scene. Also, I'm hosting one of the leading tech podcasts over here named Future Weekly. And I'm also advising different kinds of governments or government actors in Europe when it comes to startup and tech policy. On the one hand, the Austrian government, but also on the other hand, the EU Commission.
So you have a lot of time on your hands and you're bored, is what you're basically saying.
All the time.
And you've been doing this for a while, right? You've been doing the Austrian scene for a long time. Like, how long have you been doing this for?
Yes, 8 years. 8 years. Soon 8.5, actually.
I think that's like defined as like a tech cycle, a boom bust cycle in tech, basically.
I've seen it all, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I guess for me, it's like the older you are, I've seen it 3 times because I'm really old. So this is my third, like, it's another recession. But well, I guess this particular, we're recording this in the middle of March, so we'll see when this airs, maybe in a few weeks. But maybe there will be a planet to talk about. Maybe there won't be a planet. We don't know. But what does that mean? So you the Austrian startup scene. Actually, let's start more broadly. What is the EU thinking about? Like, why are you talking to the EU folks? Like, what's the thinking there?
So I think what the EU currently is known is probably regulation. So there's this meme that says America innovates and China duplicates and Europe regulates. And I think we've woken up a bit in the last few months and years that maybe this is not the smartest strategy if we want to attract the best brains to Europe to build exciting stuff here. So I think with the new EU Commission, we do see some movement here, some realization that we need to change the narrative and we need to be bolder and more courageous when it comes to our tech policy. And that's why there's different initiatives that are now going on. One is the EU Startup and Scale Up Strategy, where mainly the idea is to collect all kinds of ideas, what Europe can do to be more attractive to startups. And there's also a grassroots movement. One is, for example, the EU Inc. movement, where the main idea is that Europe gets one common legal framework, how you can start a company. It would be in a so-called 28 regime, which would mean there's still the 27 member states with their own regimes, but you just put a virtual 28 country.
Okay. That's interesting.
And that's how you can then create the new kind of legislation that is accessible to everyone in Europe and also founder friendly. And this is super important because one of the main downsides of Europe at the moment is that you have these 27 different countries, different regulations, different perceptions, also different markets. So the idea is to create one common market, because that's essential if you want to compete globally.
So I guess, unpacking that a little bit, on the first hand, is the problem that Europe has, like you don't have the talent and you need to attract the talent, or is it about activating the talent that exists? Because you said like it's about sort of attracting people to the EU, but you're not a small set of countries with not a small set of income. Like your GDP is not small. The number of humans aren't small. You're an educated population. I'm saying this broadly.
Mhm.
Um, Speak to me about that. Like, why, did you mean that, or was that just like a reflex?
I do mean it in a way that I think it always needs to be the goal that the smartest brains from all over
I
the
know.
world
Yeah.
are attracted to your economy. But at the same time, you're right. One of our biggest problems is actually that smart people are leaving Europe to
Okay.
start their businesses somewhere else. So some of the most successful American companies have been founded by Europeans who have gone there. So, for example, Stripe is a good example.
Yes.
And I think if we want to be competitive, then we need those people to stay. We need to actually access and properly activate the talent that we have, and also the good research that we have in Europe. We do have world-class research, but not even close to enough of this research is then put into practice and then put into businesses. So that's where we are lacking also culturally in Europe, that we are not as entrepreneurial as yeah, if you look over the pond.
Yeah. No. I happen to live in Canada, and we have the same hand wringing about like, um, you know, we have great IP, but our ability, desire, capability of turning that IP into business is just it's a
Yes.
cultural thing. I mean, given that we are a pseudo colony of the UK and France, that does sort of comport. On the other hand, you're saying having this sort of legal framework that exists independent of the EU countries. You know, as an outsider, my view has been, you kind of, if you're going to do business in the EU and you're going to spin up a company, and we're going to get to this in the other hat that you wear, you kind of like look for, the right shape and flavor of country with the right shape and flavor of regulation. So, it became very common at the beginning of the last decade. So like maybe 15 years ago, 14 years ago, when, American companies were like trying to expand, they all ended up in Ireland because of the
Mhm.
tax framework. Um, do you think, is it do you really need that? Like, why do you think that is a necessary thing to have this 28th sort of fake state?
Mhm.
Um, what advantage do you think you get out of that?
I think mainly defragmentation and standardization, because
Okay.
effectively there is not this one company form that is currently used broadly. So that
Hmm.
means, for if you're a business angel or if you're a VC, um, and you want to invest pan-European, then you have to learn lots of different regulatory environments, and
Hmm.
they are very different, and some of them are extremely bureaucratic and slow.
Right.
And this, it just takes away the speed that you need to be able to succeed. So since there is no one standard, it, I do believe it's smart to think about, okay, let's create something new which really caters to the needs of startups, and use that then for the standardization that is necessary.
Makes sense. And the kind of objects are you talking about, like safes or convertible notes, like those kinds of things, so that the investor doesn't have to worry about the like local
Exactly.
laws? Like it's like you in that country. I like you. Here's a safe standard document. Yeah.
100%. This is
Okay.
exactly it. We're missing the safe. There is not this one standard where in America, if you want to invest in a company, this can be done in effectively minutes. And
Right.
in Europe, depending on the regulation, this could take weeks, months. That's slowing us down.
Right. So originally it was called a dangerous, but now it is called a safe. Got it. Let's take off the EU hat, and let's focus on the Austria side of things for a second, and we'll probably come back to the EU hat inevitably. Um, did you start this uh, organization in Austria, or did it exist when you kind of turned your focus in this direction?
Yes, when I turned my focus on it, it already existed.
Okay.
I was somehow involved from the beginning, had early touch points already with it, but I took over as a managing director in 2000, end of 2016, early 2017, and I before that I worked at some of the big tech conferences in Austria, and I've been part of the ecosystem, but I only joined the organization professionally once it was set up already for 3 years.
Right. And how does it work? Like, is it a not-for-profit? Is it a charity? Is it a for-profit? Like, how do you run it?
No, it's a not for profit. So the idea is that it's a neutral and independent umbrella organization where everybody in the startup ecosystem gets together, and we create a common platform to create a bigger pie for everyone.
Right. So what does that actually mean? I'm assuming events obviously play a role, but what do you do? Like, what's the function? What do you like theoretically do, and what do you practically do?
So we have three main verticals of activities. One, you already mentioned the events, is community work. So we do organize all kinds of different events, from the big yearly startup conference in Vienna to monthly meetups, weekly afterworks, to office hours, to CEO roundtables. So all kinds of smaller, bigger formats, open or behind closed doors, just connecting the scene. On the other hand, we also, on that level, when it comes to community, we are running all kinds of different media channels. So big newsletters, social media channels, the podcast. So trying to also get the most relevant news, activities, information out there for the whole community. So the second one is that we are a think tank. We're doing research, publishing the biggest study about the Austrian startup ecosystem, and on the other hand, using these facts and figures that we collect then to advise political decision makers in turning Austria into a tech hub. And the third pillar then is that we are also an educational platform where we run two main programs. One that we do in schools, where we try to install more entrepreneurial spirit already early on. So we do entrepreneurship weeks in a bit more than 100 schools all over the country at the moment, trying to awaken the entrepreneurial spirit in people by getting them to actually work on their own projects. So highly practical. And the second program is a bit more narrow, where we actually take people from wanting to start a business to actually doing that. So bringing high potentials from all kinds of interdisciplinary backgrounds together, and doing a fellowship with them for 1 year, where we provide them mentoring workshops and trying to get them off the ground.
Right. Again, not very much to do. Are you you said you're not for profit? You're funded by the government, or do you get donations, or how does the financing work?
All kinds of different channels. The main
Yeah.
financing is actually sponsorships. So we have
Okay.
more than 60, it's called supporting members, who provide us with some basic funding, and in return they also can position themselves in through our channels. On the other hand, we do have projects that are also co-financed by the government, for example, our school program, and we also get donations from philanthropic donations in the end. Yes.
Oh, that's cool. That's interesting. I mean, it makes sense. It's just interesting to hear that mix, because, the default would be like, well, of course, it's the government that would want to promote entrepreneurship. And then I guess at the other end, how do you know, I guess with individual students or individual companies, you can sort of track their progress in terms of like we touched them in some way, we had an effect, I guess, is how you measure efficacy on the turning people into entrepreneurs side. Is that right?
Yes, in the end, we look at how many of our program participants then actually start a business. Yes.
Right. And then on the government side, which is like, trying to advocate for innovation in your ecosystem, how do you know you've influenced anything?
we look at the legislative process or progress that we managed to get done. So, for example, in Austria, we have a new legal setup that is specifically addressed to startups. The first one since more than 100 years. That was our idea. It took more than 6 years
Oh,
to
that's
actually
cool.
get that done, and lots of negotiations. And the result at the end is unfortunately still far away from what we initially wished, but it's a step forward, and it's easier to actually give stock options to employees now. There's some kind of tax benefits for that, and it's easier to
Ah,
get people into the country, so get them some kind of work visa specifically for highly talented people. So we do have these initiatives that through our work have been done. I would ideally would have wished for more, to be honest. So it is frustrating and disappointing often to be in this political space, because it needs a lot of patience, and there's lots and lots of takes forever. 6 years is a really long time, but yeah, at least we can show some results.
that's cool. I mean, at the end of the day, that's it, like almost an administration's length.
Exactly.
You have to like get it passed, from one election to another. Um, but maybe talk a little bit more now about the characteristics of your ecosystem. I mean, uh, I don't know if people automatically think startups Vienna, startups Austria, like per se, but I'm sure you've got a story to tell. So tell me about what is the Austrian ecosystem like? Do you have a focus or an area of expertise that you think you're particularly good in? What's your UVP
I
for
love that.
59 cents, 59 Canadian cents? If you say it well, I'll write a check in the 28 state framework.
All right. No pressure, I guess.
Everyone's listening.
Um, I think what you need to be able to build a good business is a stable environment, a good life in the background, a country where you can attract good people to, and I think we do these basics really well in Austria. We have great standard of living. Vienna has been voted the most livable city in the world for, I don't know, 10 times in a row. So if you want to have that basics covered really well, and at the same time it doesn't, like, life is pretty cheap here.
Mhm.
So if you have the relationship between cost of living and standard of living is exceptional here. So you don't have to worry about all that stuff. Infrastructure works. Stuff is good on the private level, so you can really focus on your business. And on that side, I think we do still have some room for improvement when it comes to bureaucracy and taxes. So I wouldn't say that we don't have a lot of homework still to do, but I think
Mhm.
we enable you to focus on your business. And when it comes to focus topics that we do have in Austria, we have strong universities. So everything going in the direction of life science is traditionally strong here. It's because we also have that industry here, the pharma industry. We do have big traditional industries also here. So if you're a startup addressing those target groups, classic old industries, so startups that have that as a customer group, I also believe that we are probably a good starting ground. And if you look at Austria geographically, we are very much in the center of Europe, and also traditional. If you look back in history, we've always been part of somehow the bridge between the East and the West. And I think that can be a great starting point if you want to put yourself on Europe's map, to start from Austria, both being able to expand to the west, but also to the east, where in both directions you have ideal access, also ideal access to great talent from Eastern Europe that is not as expensive as in other countries, but also
Mhm.
the classic Western society and living standard. I think it's a good combination.
You know, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, like, again, I happen to be based in Canada at the moment, and we're not. It sounds like we're not 100% dissimilar in the sense that we sell the ground beneath our feet to an extent. So you have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 25% of your GDP is manufacturing of stuff, and then you have a strong sort of services sector like tourism and financial services, uh, and stuff like that. Um, I guess one question is, and tell me if I got that wrong.
Mhm.
But one question is, you know, I want to get to like what you said about the value proposition in a second, but do you have the problem of, hey, this is the things that we do. We have a financial services sector that's pretty strong. We have a manufacturing sector that's pretty strong. Um, that works. Innovation, weird and risky, and
Yes.
nobody really knows what's happening. Is there a cultural push? Is there recognition that your economy needs to shift a little bit to be innovation centric, or whatever the heck that means, or is it still an uphill battle?
It's still an uphill battle, but it's right now changing because there is economic
Okay.
pressure happening. So we're
Yeah.
not doing super well generally in Europe. I think
Hmm.
that's clear that our industries are under pressure. So we're slowly waking up. I feel like over the last few years, I've been preaching all the time, guys, we don't have enough of a tech industry. This is the reason why economically we will be more and more under pressure because we're not strong in these future industries. And
Hmm.
it was such a good life for most people here because the old
Hmm.
industries were still working. Then people were saying, "Yeah, yeah, right," but nothing was happening. And now you begin to feel that people actually realize, yeah, actually, um, being in a recession and not having these dynamic industries, that might not be the best path forward. So we're beginning to wake up.
And going back to the value proposition side, I mean, it's interesting. A lot of what I find that most geographies do is they say, yeah, but we have cheaper and smarter talent. And that is certainly a value proposition, not necessarily the unique value proposition, because again, everyone says it. Whether they're aware of whether that's true or not is a different story. Um, there is a social, unlike, I guess, the States, there is a bit of a social safety net there where you can't fall right to the bottom, right? You can't, if you don't have your job, you do have healthcare, you do have, like, I guess, unemployment insurance and stuff like that. So there is a bottom in case if your company falls out of favor. Is that right?
Yes, very much right. I think that the safety net is very strong here. You could sometimes even say it might be too strong to
Yeah,
have the
it causes
economic.
complacency,
Yes,
maybe.
exactly, and
Yeah,
might not always get people into the right mindset, also entrepreneurial mindset. But overall,
right.
yes, it generally the system allows a lot of risk, and it's just culturally that not enough people are taking that risk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then is it also true that on the other side, actually, let me go down that train of thought a little further. So geographic centricity is useful, like it is if you want to walk to a country, I guess it's useful to be physically in the middle of them. But I can't imagine that that's like I'm going to set up shop in Austria because it is physically in the middle. If I throw a dart in Europe, I just happen to land in Austria 63% of the time. Maybe unpack a little bit more of like why you? Is it because of your closeness to the industrial or manufacturing sector, or their headquarters of banks there that are willing to be disrupted, or like what let's get dirty about like really what's going on in Austria. Like you have your ear to the ground of what's happening. So tell me, how juxtapose you with the rest of Europe or Canada or America. Why? Convince me. I'm starting a podcasting company, and I want to do it to compete not only with Marcus's podcast, but also with all the podcasts. Convince me that Austria is the place to build.
I mean, Europe for quite a lot of the 20th century was divided by an Iron Curtain. So you have
Hmm.
these two different cultures still. You see that in the German elections, where still, if you
Yes.
look at the eastern counties, they're still completely different from the mindset than the Western. So I think if you want to set your foot on towards Europe, I think you have to manage that. And Austria traditionally has been that spot where those two cultures somehow come together. Also, even
Interesting.
more going backwards, the monarchy, where Austria was very much in the center, the big central fraction,
Yeah. My
always.
parents are Hungarian. I get it. I get it.
Yes, so I think that has been the base why a lot of the Western European companies have European, like some kind of headquarters for Eastern Europe in Vienna, because it still has the classic Western society, also the institutions, the trust in the system, but at the same time, there's the geographic proximity, but also the cultural closeness. There is some kind of connection between Vienna, especially as a city, and the Central and Eastern European countries. So I think that is why I would say, if you look at expanding from one country to all over Europe, Austria, or specifically also Vienna as a city, is in a very unique spot. At the same time, yes, you also talked about the industries that could act also as a customer base. And here also, before I already mentioned the so-called old industries, or car manufacturing and stuff like that, where Austria is very much interlinked with Germany and also Czechia. But the other one that you mentioned is financial services. So a lot of the Eastern Europe, a lot of the banks that are leading in Eastern Europe are actually headquartered also in Austria. They are strongly interlinked also with the startup ecosystem here. So we do have some leading fintech players in Austria, for example, Bitpanda, who is the leading crypto platform in Europe. They are headquartered in Austria with Austrian founders. So you have a few industries where you have that connection also with the existing industries and the startup scene. And I think this is something to build on.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're right. I think we belie a lot of the cultural stuff. You just sort of hand wave over a lot of the time. And at the end of the day, it's, can you get people to work together? And as you build a company, the whole point is, going after different segments of the market who potentially have different culture and different perspectives. So I think having the empathy for both sides or multiple sides of who your customer base could be, and having that history is probably quite useful. Is there something particularly like, you mentioned at the very end there, like different, look, in America, if you're starting a fintech, New York is not a terrible place to do it. It's the center of money. In San Francisco, it's, B2C. I'm willing to, set up a social network. Probably one of that in like Beijing are the two places you could set up a social media company and actually hope to make some money out of it. Is there something particularly, sure, you've got financial services. Is there something particularly like when you get your boots on the ground in the ecosystem and you're talking to these entrepreneurs, do you see patterns of the kinds of companies that are coming up? Yes, it's early 2025, so I'm sure you're going to say AI something, but are you seeing patterns in terms of maybe either not obvious technologies like AI, maybe not that one, or if you have something to say about it, say something about it, or particular verticals where you're like, oh yeah, we're super strong, or we have a lot of attraction here where lots of people come, or we keep spinning up companies in X?
Yeah. I think generally research intense companies are something that we see that we can attract well, because we have a very strong system of grants here. So public grants, they are equity free. Some of them you don't even have to pay back. So in the initial phase of building a research heavy business, where the business case is not clear yet, and also from a private side, it's often too risky to invest. There we actually provide a strong base of public funding, and that attracts lots of international founders, also from Asia, to come here and start up. We do have sometimes the issue that in the AI sector, that the people, after spending their research time here, then they actually take the companies to the US and be headquartered there. So, for example, 2 of the 25 most funded AI companies actually have Austrian co-founders, but are now headquartered. And one of them also actually started out here in Vienna, and then after, I think 2 years or so, moved to 1 year and 1.5 years, moved to San Francisco. The other one was where the people researched in Austria, and then they founded in New York. So I think we have a strong talent base when it comes to AI. Sometimes I think because of the defragmentation of the general European markets, and especially also the financing markets when it comes to startup investors, we do lose some of them too.
Is that a thing? There's at least in Canada, that's called a brain drain.
Mm-hmm.
We lose the smart people to it is mildly walkable from Canada to the States, unlike Austria. Um, is this something that's sort of top of mind for all of you? Which is like, I mean, at the end of the day, let's face it. The reason this happens is because crappy shit tons of capital, lots and lots and lots of capital, risk capital specifically. In theory, you get developers and people who have scaled companies infinitely, and so you get access to talent that you might not get access to in your own ecosystem. Like, talk to me about, like, do you worry about that? Is that really, like, is that the thing that don't go away, come here, or you're like, no, it's gonna happen. We have to be okay with the fact that happens. We need to, like, cultivate a culture of entrepreneurship, whether it is building unicorns or just building an innovation ecosystem, which you don't need to go to another country necessarily to do. How do you balance those things? And if you do want to encourage the latter, I mean, sure, if you can tell us how to, like, stop the brain drain, that would be amazing. But on the not that side, when you have people, like, how do you foment a culture that makes it worth staying? Aside from the artifacts that you talked about creating at the beginning of the show.
Yeah. I do believe that these artifacts are having that common European sphere, simply because we are 450 million people in Europe. It's just they are not accessible. And yes, the money is the second point. Simply, you get different kind of valuation if you raise in the Valley or in New York than if you raise here in Europe. And this is a fact. Right. And as long as that is there, the very, very, very top percentile of companies that are shooting to the moon, they will always have that in the back of their mind. Not all of them do it, but they will also always have that, I could also go to America and be worth double or triple or something like that. So from a technological sovereignty perspective of Europe also, and this is becoming more and more important now with also the way the world is developing, this is it sucks. It's really bad. On the other hand, of course, what has been true in the past, and as long as the world is not completely turning upwards, usually those people go over to the US and they spend a few years there and grow and become real rock stars. And at some point they come back simply because of the quality of life. And all these people that went back when I started in 2017 at Austrian Startups, all the people that back then went to the US and were at the US at that point, all of them already are back. And now they use the spirit and everything they learned to build a better European ecosystem. So the main brain behind the EU Inc. movement, Andreas Klinger, he was exactly, when I started, he was over in the US building Product Hunt. And nice. In the end, now he's coming back. He lives in Berlin now, I think. So I do believe there's also some good nuggets that come with the brain drain if people then actually bring that spirit back.
Yeah. I mean, these days more than ever, the signpost is "Welcome back."
Yes.
And assuming we're each in sovereign countries when the show airs, there's probably something else about, again, what I like about what you're talking about is sort of fomenting the innovation spirit or the ecosystem in the country, like through education programs and through this other stuff. How, there's there's a class of companies that potentially makes sense to go, raise lots and lots of capital, whether it's in the EU, whether it's in America or whatever. That, power law. I mean, this show is about all the ones that aren't necessarily doing the power law thing. So how are you seeing that sort of show up in your ecosystem? Like, yes, it is the case in most countries. You have a successful entrepreneur, they make a lot of money, they come back and they bring the cultural aspects of entrepreneurship back. They bring capital. which allows them to sort of seed the ecosystem as an angel investor or start a fund or whatever. But what are you seeing in terms of like normal human beings who aren't necessarily building power law companies? Are you seeing any motion in that segment of the population, entrepreneurs and investors?
Yes.
Okay, answer done. Just kidding.
No, I do. I mean, we have generally a strong base of that also in Austria. So we are a country of small and medium enterprises, if you look at it just from the numbers. So that's always been true. But I also see in the so-called startup scene, I see a movement towards more organic growth, more bootstrapped growth. So not the
Yeah.
classic venture models. Simply also because, yes, we've been part of a tech recession in the last few years. So this is also where the not so nice sides of being a venture case come to the front, where it's you're not always in the driving seat anymore, and where you're pressured to do things that might not be at the core of what you want to do. So I think a lot of people that especially also start to become serial entrepreneurs and start a second time, they have that ideal in mind where they say, I just want to build something that people want to pay for from the first day on, and be able to steer that myself. So I do see a trend in this direction too.
Is there, as we wrap up, I'll do the negative first, and I'll go back to the not negative. Are there considerations, I remember when, maybe it is better that way, but I remember when Elon Musk took over Twitter, he just started firing people, just like he's doing in America today, um, arbitrarily. He's like, his MO is fire everybody until you hit the jugular and then stitch up the jugular and say, oops. And I remember, I forget what office it was, but when he started firing people in the EU, it's like, you can't, it's not how it works here. You can't just fire people because you feel like firing people. What are considerations in terms of like building companies in Austria specifically that are, there's a yin and a yang, right? You've got a social safety net, you've got a healthcare plan, you don't have to worry about paying gigantic amounts of healthcare insurance. But there must be a downside. Like you can't just terminate somebody because they came in with no pants or something like that.
I mean, I think most of these stories come from Germany, where labor law is much more extreme than in most places
Oh
in
yeah,
Europe. So I don't think that's the classic European case. In Austria, you can let go of
fire
people
somebody for
if
no
they're
pay.
underperforming. It's completely okay. It might take a while, so you have some kind of duration that you need to give them to before you can actually stop paying them, which is
Right,
usually between
reasonable.
1 and 3 months, something like that.
Okay, okay.
But otherwise, I think that is rather a German thing. That it's generally difficult to fire people.
Got it. So
So
start a company in Austria and be an employee in Germany. Got it.
Yep, fair point. But of course, I mean, Austria also has its downside. It's one is that similarly to Germany, for most of the stuff you want to do in terms of getting investors on board or setting up the company initially, you need notaries, which slow down the process, which are expensive. So generally, it is a country that also the welfare state, it costs something. So taxes are rather high, not on the top, but rather high.
Okay.
So yes, it all
For
has,
corporations specifically,
yes,
not individuals. Yeah.
both. Also,
Okay.
if like income tax is rather on the higher side. For the companies, it's actually, I think, average. It's okayish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we have some homework to do there to become more attractive, to become also more efficient as a state, be quicker as a state. There's the new government that is in place now since a few weeks. There is actually a task force for de-bureaucratization and deregulation. Hopefully doing something like the Doge department, but a bit more civilized and a bit more, I would say,
Thoughtful.
picking their spots that actually need to be changed. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then do you find that there companies that like incorporate in country A and reside in Austria? Like it doesn't really matter what company, but fine, incorporate in America, run it in Austria, or is there weirds or another EU country or an Asian country? Is that a thing, or is it like it usually incorporate, run, operate in the Austrian market, and then expand out from there?
Yeah, I think I don't know too many that live in Austria and have the company somewhere else. I
Right.
guess there's some kind of legal reasons for that, whether it's some kind of taxation that then the other country has because you're not living there,
Hmm.
or you have here because where are you then actually working? So I think through the complexity of international laws here, I don't know too many people. So the people that actually live here usually then also work here.
Right. That makes sense. All right. One thing I've seen in the past is, lots of, depending on the kind of company and depending on what you want to be when you grow up, some companies create Delaware Corps with a tool like Stripe Atlas or something where you're just like, company in a box, and I'm an American company and I can take capital. Doesn't matter where you really live because you've got, money going back and forth, or you've got a, subsidiary corp in the country that you're in. But it sounds to me then if you're serious about that in your case, you all just
It, it
show up there.
we, you point out it's actually true. We have a few of the classic Datawares in a box models, especially in the startup scene, but
Yeah.
not a lot of them. Because if you're doing that, you don't have access to all kinds of the
Good
whole
stuff.
public grants system and all the good stuff that you get through being in Austria. You don't have access to it, so that's why it's rather
Right. So
seldom.
got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Well, the other interesting thing is that there are like again juxtaposing, say the ecosystem I live in, the Canadian ecosystem. One of the critiques are um, we do have there is a public granting system in Canada. There's tax credits for taking risks, and that depending on your cynicism can create sort of zombie companies that aren't they shouldn't exist. They exist but for the state. Their business model is and maybe they should have died like 2 years in, not and it's 8 years, and you're like, wow, how do you even exist? And there's really good at writing grants. Not to say that I've known entrepreneurs that are really good at getting in accelerators. So it's that is a skill. Do you suffer from that disease as well?
Yes, of course. I think it's very difficult to design grants that are not bringing this same symptom. At the same time, if you look at all the successful companies that have been
Yeah.
started out of Austria, nearly all of them have used the grant system too. So you do get
Right.
the positive sides, but yes, we have the zombie companies, and it's a strain on the system because yeah, it just prolongs death for them. And in the sense, that's where um, again I'm having lots of ideas how we can make grants more efficient and more close to the actual business reality. The problem is there it clashes with the state mentality where they are always in some way risk of yeah, they are scared of then being exposed as having wasted money. So as long as they can show that the money is in line with initially was planned to do with the
Mhm.
money, they're safe. So this is these zones you have to navigate in some way if you want to make grants more efficient and more effective also. But also here we have a task force that is currently being set up. So over the next few years, I hope we become better in that too.
And so, like the last bit, and I'm just really curious about this because I mean, there's a common thread that we've talked about through the whole episode, which is, this sort of culture of entrepreneurship. And it sounds like you've got your fingers in lots of pies. You're doing a lot across from the, early days of entering education to the middle part of your career to whatever, in terms of like fomenting a culture of entrepreneurship. And, I remember, again, this is a bad example. It's Germany, but I think I told this to you when I met you. I was running a thing with the Center for Investigative Reporting out of San Francisco and Google's News Labs, about teaching journalists design thinking. And I remember going to Berlin, and a whole bunch of people showed up. And I'm like, what do you do? And they're like, nothing. I'm like, what do you mean nothing? And there's like, oh yeah, the government pays for my rent, and I get a salary or something. And I'm like, well, that explains why you're here, because you have the time to do it. But it also blew my mind, and I'm Canadian. It blew my mind, and I'm clearly doing something wrong. So, if that, again, that's Germany, that's not Austria, but if you've got that sort of backstop, I guess it's a cultural thing, whether that means, sit and just use what the state provides, or use that as the basis for something, because the risk floor is higher. You don't have to worry as much about actually losing your house and your shirt. Your pants, we agree, are lost already. That's what we agreed. Austria is for no pants. But how do you do this? How do you, like, there are metrics. You can say to the government, well, we've created this policy, or we've put these 9 cohorts through these programs that we've created, which is admirable. I'm not poo-pooing it, but how do you turn the ship? How do you know you're doing it, and how do you kind of prod it in the right direction? Like, this must be the thing that keeps you up at night, no?
Yes. And I love the way you put it, because it's very, you're completely right. In the end, we have that social safety net, and you can interpret it in 2 completely different ways. And this is the main problem we have culturally, is that too many people interpret it in a way, okay, now I can be lazy and I'm always safe, and let's just, okay, they believe they enjoy life, but I don't think they enjoy life because they don't have the purpose to actually do something. So
Totally agree. We're both like podcasters who do entrepreneurship. We totally agree with each other.
Fair, but I do believe there's an essential truth that if you have something in life to work for, a belief that there is a purpose to what you're doing, it's a much better life. And I think that's what also all kinds of studies show. So what we have to do is activate the people out there, that they use this very strong social safety net to use it to their advantage, and say, okay, then I can take risk. Then I can actually be the pilot in my own life, and not a passenger anymore. And this is why I believe our work in schools is so important, because that comes at an early stage. And that's where our current school system is just not providing them with the right mindset and with the right tools. It's still based on 19th century ideals, where it's about seeing human beings as workforce. And this is less and less becoming what is needed also on the labor markets. So what we're trying to do is the same that actually Austria managed to do in the 70s and 80s when it comes to skiing. Because if you look at Austria, what we're really known for is for skiing, usually, maybe also classical music, but yes, we're very good in the Olympics when it comes to skiing. And we did that very strategically. In the 70s and 80s, every child in Austria has learned skiing in school. And that doesn't mean that everybody becomes a school skiing instructor, but it means that everybody has access to that and can try it out, whether it's something for them. And that same principle we want to use when it comes to entrepreneurship, letting them try it out during their school years and letting them experience their entrepreneurial spirit. And through that, activating them in a way that they're willing to take risks and seeing themselves as active players in their own life.
That's great. That's a great answer. A plus. All right. And the last question I'll ask you, then I'll let you go live your life and continue your 9 jobs, is, so you're on the show floor. I actually met Christiane at Collision, the tech web summit, basically in Toronto. And that's how we got connected. You're at the booth. You're at Web Summit. You're representing Austria. And I'm an entrepreneur, and I am from not Austria. And you want to pitch me to come, but what's your 2-second? You want to keep me from walking by the booth, and you're like, no, build in Austria. What would you say to me? Again, elevator pitch, no pressure.
Okay, yeah, be with me, because Austrian Startups is an amazing ecosystem where we do provide a community that is supporting and at the same time pushing you to new levels. And of course, great standard of living with very moderate costs of living, being at the heart of Europe with gates to Eastern and Western Europe, and a system of public support when it comes to social security, but health system, but also public grants that gives you the place, that gives you the space to build your own business in peace, while all around everything is crazy and we're living in crazy times. We give you stability to actually focus on your business.
That's pretty good. Pretty good for an unprompted. I gave you no heads up. And you forgot the asterisk, and you must ski between locations. You cannot, there's no way to get there other than skiing. So if you can't ski, don't bother.
But we'll get you there.
And Markus, if people want to check out the organization you represent during the day, not the evening one, but where do they go?
They go to austrianstartups.com.
Austrianstartups.com. That's pretty easy to remember. Thanks for making the time on the show, and look forward to seeing you either on this side of the pond or on that side of the pond, depending on the week. Thanks for making the time, man.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching. Keep building, and until next time.